He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. You guys know the deal by now. And Jori Epstein going to join us a little bit later in the episode. Frank, we're in training camp season. It's time for inside coverage, the how and why of all things going on in the NFL. Excited because we actually have real things to talk about. Excited because there's big drama all over the place. Like, Frank, I feel like every week right now, things just get a little bit spicier and spicier. Like we're living in Bravo world where we got players demanding trades and we're trying to figure out who's playing where in the preseason. Like, I kind of love all of the mystery around the NFL right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, this seemed to be the week where everything really, really got kicked up. I was spending some vacation time over the summer, including in Nashville. And it was like, oh, this is nice. And then you realize, like, oh, no, the fire hose is turning on and everything's happening. You must be excited. The preseason football, like, this is your time to shine, man. You gotta be
like,
really,
look,
really
I think you're being saucy. I think there's some sauce going on right here. But come on. Like, I know nobody's tuning in to listen to me complain about the Raiders. But let's be real. Like, Aiden O'Connell versus Gardner Minshew, the reports out of practice is it's garbage v. garbage right now. It looks terrible.
No, I
from
keep
both
hearing how great the defense is, which is, okay, all right.
Spin.
If we're going to try that angle, all of a sudden it's the 85 Bears. It's not that they're facing Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Cool, wow. I guess. Wow. Like, but yes. That is one of the, like, if you're listening.
It took 2 minutes, but it took 2 minutes for us to fight like mommy and daddy. Go ahead, 2 minutes.
That's true. If you're talking about, like, the top storylines of the preseason, definitely the Raiders are up there. I'm interested in that quarterback competition. Mike Tomlin he came out and said today, like, as strongly as he has said it all offseason, this is absolutely a quarterback competition. Justin Fields is going to get the start on Friday. That's interesting. There's some interesting stuff that's going to happen in the preseason, but honestly, nothing compared to whatever's going to happen with Brandon Aiyuk. That is the one seismic move still left to go in August.
When Justin Fields, and I do mean when, is named the starter, Stone, who's back, producer extraordinaire, we've missed him. He's a huge part of this show. He's back with us this week for the rest of the season. I need Stone to go back and find all the times that you have said Justin Fields was going to start, cut it up into a blast, and just so that we can just sit back there and toot our own horn. I'm going to be like a clown walking behind you on a Thanksgiving Day parade, just going like toot, 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 toot with all the horns just for Frank Schwab. So there we go. By the way, Jori's not on yet, which is why I can just go toot, 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 because, childish wins. You mentioned Aiyuk. Let's be very clear. As we tape right now, and this is the glory of podcasts, right? Like, as we tape right now, it feels like every 10 minutes we get a new, this team's in, this team's out. But what we know so far is that Brandon Aiyuk, obviously not happy with this contract situation. That's where all this comes from. The 49ers did give him the opportunity, he and his team, the opportunity to go out and start talking to other teams about a new contract and a trade. We do know, according to multiple reports, that there were a couple of teams that looked like they were in on this. Maybe the Browns, maybe the Patriots, maybe the Steelers. Then we get, the Patriots might be out. So there's a lot of moving pieces, Frank. And the first thing I want to be is just honest with everybody. As we tape right now, the moving pieces are sort of all over the place. So we're just going to do our best to make the best guesses out of this situation. So let's start with the most important part of this. What the hell are the 49ers doing? And this is going to be evergreen. I don't care if he gets traded or if they're just talking to it. This is a team that's in their Super Bowl window right now. And there is absolutely nothing they're going to get right now that's going to be better for them today than Brandon Aiyuk is right now. And if I'm the 49ers and he comes in and says, I won't play, I'm going to look at him and say, hey, people in hell want ice water. I know you don't want to be here. I don't care. Unless you want to sit out and miss all your money, which most players don't want to do, and lose the opportunity at the season, which most players don't want to do, you're going to play for San Francisco because our window isn't next year. Whatever you're given, team gives us in the draft, that doesn't matter. Replacing Brandon Aiyuk is very difficult to do. I think the 49ers are even crazy to entertain conversations no matter where they go for a player that matters so much to them right now.
I will say this, the one trade speculation thing that's been out there that does make sense to me is the 49ers send him to Cleveland. Cleveland sends back a pick and Amari Cooper. Because, look, Amari Cooper and Brandon Aiyuk aren't separated by that much in my mind. I think they're both really, really good receivers. Yes, Aiyuk's a little bit better, but you get rid of an unhappy guy for a guy who theoretically wants to be there and you get a pick back. Okay, I could see that. But the whole, like, Kendrick Bourne is the one coming back. Like, do we really want Kendrick Bourne coming off of an ACL? And it seems like the Patriots are out anyway because, oh my God, like, we have very rarely seen trade talks happen publicly like this. Like, usually So a few things leak out here and there. This has been very public this week. Matt Mayoko over at NBC Sports Bay Area is just doing a heck of a job. Like, he is plugged in over there. Great reporter. I've following his reporting on this. It basically, let's go through the timeline real quick of the week. First, the 49ers basically gave permission to 4 different teams: the Commanders, the Steelers, the Browns, and the Patriots, to talk contract with Brandon Aiyuk. They could come up with a trade agreement with these teams, but until Brandon Aiyuk signs off on an extension, nobody's sending Amari Cooper and a draft pick for Brandon Aiyuk for 1 year. Like, that's just not going to happen. So Ayuk's a big part of this. It turns out that the Browns and the Patriots trade framework was in place, Mayoko reported, but Aiyuk has to talk contract with them. Okay, cool. Now, a report comes out on Tuesday from Adam Schefter saying, oh, the Steelers are back in. They've re-engaged. Okay, now they're back in. And now the Patriots are out as of Tuesday night. Well, we found out why. Mayoko said the Patriots offered $30 million per year to Brandon Aiyuk, and Brandon Aiyuk showed no interest in joining the New England Patriots. Now, that it kind of gives you an idea where the Patriots are at. This was the cream of the NFL for years and years and years and years. And now you're offering Brandon Aiyuk $30 million a year, and he's like, I don't really want to go to that situation. That could be a mistake. Look, things change quickly in the NFL.
I think what you're saying here is huge, Frank. The Patriots have gone from being a destination where you will win a Super Bowl to a destination that now could even overpay top talent, and they'll look around and be like, nah, I don't want to do that. Like, there are power rankings right now that have San Francisco at 1 and New England at 32. If you need to know how far the Patriots have fallen, look no farther than the fact that they offered fair market value to a superstar player who looked around and said, no, not for New England. Like, that speaks to how low the players in the league regard the Patriots in the conversation of where the NFL is.
And I think it's even market value plus. I think market value for Aiyuk is more in the 25 to 27 range, and they offered 30. They kind of came over the top and said, you can't turn this down. And Brandon Aiyuk said, yeah, I can. But yes, it speaks to where the Patriots are right now. Now, look, not every team is going to be the Houston Texans, right? But they do provide a blueprint of this thing can turn around really fast. If Jared Mayo ends up being a great coach, if Drake May ends up being a dynamic quarterback, the Patriots could, I'm not saying they're going to win a division and win a playoff game like the Texans did, but they could look a lot better in a year than they do right now. So I think it's a little silly to get wrapped up in what they look like right now, but it does speak to where the Patriots are, that they made more than a fair offer for Brandon Aiyuk and got basically spurned. And now you understand why the report was out there that, oh, they're out. They don't want any part of this conversation. They're really excited about their young receivers. Yeah, okay. You broke up with Brandon Aiyuk before he could break up with you. That's what basically happened. They wanted to get out in front of the story because I'm sure the Patriots are embarrassed by this. They had framework in place. They already got spurned by Calvin Ridley in the offseason. Remember that, right? And a big part, and Robert Kraft said, oh, his girlfriend wanted to live in the South. Maybe the quarterback situation was part of it too. No, it's a quarterback situation, Robert. We all know. So the Patriots make a fair offer to Calvin Ridley. He takes a Titans offer. They make a more than fair offer for Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk reportedly shows no interest in wanting to join the Patriots. This is embarrassing for that franchise. Like, they can't land. They try to give away money to a number 1 receiver. They can't do it. Nobody will take their money. Again, this could change fast, but it does say a lot about the Patriots here and why they were trying to get out in front and paint this picture that they're just excited about Jalen Polk. Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. So moving back to the Aiyuk situation, look, I don't agree. I do agree with you. I don't agree with the 49ers trading Brandon Aiyuk. I think that, again, if you get Amari in a pick, I get it. Okay, you're getting a comparable receiver back. But
I still, to be very clear, I wouldn't do it. I don't think
really. Why not? Why not?
Because
you think Aiyuk's that much better.
I think Aiyuk is younger. I think Aiyuk is more dynamic. And I think Amari has shown you that at times Amari Cooper, like Amari giveth and Amari taketh away. There are times with every team he's been in, there are times that he can blow you up for 250 yards. And then the next week, he might get 50 yards. I don't like the inconsistency that comes with Amari. And I've talked to people that have been around him in locker rooms, and they've said that little things can go a long way towards bothering him. And at some point, if that happens in San Francisco, if he just gets rubbed wrong, like you're bringing in a variable into a locker room that right now is trying to win a Super Bowl today. I don't want inconsistency in there. I think Amari Cooper, when he's on, is absolutely great. But Amari Cooper, when he's not on, he's Casper the Friendly Ghost. And I don't need that in my locker room if I'm the 49ers. I'd rather hold my feet to the fire and have a guy that I know I can depend on this year when I've got to win the Super Bowl this year than take the chance that Amari is unhappy he gets shipped out there. And then all of a sudden, you get unhappy, unengaged Amari. You got nothing.
Right. And I think my counterpoint to that would be you might be getting an unhappy, unengaged Brandon Aiyuk. He's clearly not happy.
It's fair.
Look, his feelings are hurt. And I don't even say that in like a mocking way. Like that is what happened, and it's totally reasonable. He saw Deebo Samuel make a trade request. Deebo got paid. That was 2 years ago. He saw Nick Bosa hold out for more than 40 days last year. We forget about that, but Nick Bosa held out right until a couple of days before the opener. Nick Bosa got paid. He tried both of those things, and the 49ers were like, nah, we're not paying you. He's got to be thinking, like, why you pay those guys, you don't pay me? Like, I don't think you're going to get the best of Brandon Aiyuk this year. I just don't. Like, you're going to get a good player. He's going to be a professional, I assume. He's going to be good, but is he going to be great like he was last year? Look, we've seen this get in guys' heads when they have contract disputes. T. Higgins last year, I think it happened to him. Maybe he was hurt too. There's many layers, a lot of nuance, right? But I don't think you're getting the best of Brandon Aiyuk this year without a contract extension. So that kind of shrinks the gap a little bit between him and Amari, right? Like if Brandon Ayuk's not engaged, he's not happy, you're not getting the best of Brandon Aiyuk. So I get it from that aspect. But yes, at the same time, I've said all along, and you have too, and we've agreed, the 49ers just need to say, look, Brandon, the best thing for both of us is you make your $14 million. We know you're underpaid. You ball out. We win a Super Bowl. You hit free agency, get your $30 million from whoever, and we're all happy at the end of the day. We'll see at the 10-year reunion of our Super Bowl championship team. But it seems now like that's not going to happen.
Let me ask you a deep trolling question. You mentioned Deebo, you mentioned Bosa, now we got Aiyuk, then you have Trent Williams. We've got 4 superstar players that all have money issues with the 49ers. But everybody isn't bailing on San Francisco's success this season. They're like, oh, the 49ers will work it out. Yet I hear people constantly tell me that because CD, Micah, and Dak haven't been paid, that we should give up on the Cowboys because it's going to be too much of a distraction. Why are we holding the 49ers to a different standard? This is the reason that I don't think contract conversations should be part of how we evaluate who the Cowboys are going to be, because it's not part of how we evaluate who the 49ers are going to be this year.
Right. And I just think that it's because the 49ers are better. Like they've made the Super Bowl run. They've made it that far twice recently. So I think it's just different. And the Cowboys are just the Cowboys. The Cowboys are treated, again, differently than every other NFL team. It's like covering an SEC team at some point.
I want it to stop. You know what? I want
ridiculous.
Consistency. Look, I want to live in this perfect world where everybody treats everybody equally, and we talk about all of these teams the same. That's all I want, Frank. That's all I want for Christmas.
And I will say, like, a few people have brought up to me that I was pretty down on the 49ers going into last year, saying, what if Purdy's not the real deal? Look, I changed my tune by halftime of that week 1 when they just destroyed the Steelers. We were sitting next to each other at the Yahoo Sports book in the Venetian Resort and Casino. And I said, okay, 49ers are for real. I was wrong. But people have reminded me, hey, are you down on the 49ers this year? And to be honest, a little bit I am, just because you're taking Brandon Aiyuk probably anyway away from this team, or he's not happy, or who knows where the saga is going to go. Whereas I think the Lions don't have that issue right now. The Lions, a couple other teams, Cowboys do have that issue, but there's a couple other teams in the NFC who aren't dealing with a superstar receiver getting traded in August. I think that's a big deal for the 49ers, just in terms of, are you the best team in the NFC or maybe the second best team in the NFC? Because that's a big, big difference. Because is this all for naught for the 49ers? Are they going to fall short of a Super Bowl? Like, it's crazy that we're talking about this in August. Usually this doesn't drag on so long. And for the people who say the 49ers should have handled this in April, they should have seen where this was going and either give Aiyuk an extension or trade him before the draft so you get the benefit of those picks this year. In hindsight, it definitely looks like that, because the 49ers are dealing with something they do not want to be dealing with in August.
But my only argument to that is that at some point, the 49ers had to look around and be like, look, a first-round draft pick in the middle of the first round isn't going to replace Brandon Aiyuk either. So let's spend every second we can trying to make it right, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out if we can keep this relationship together, right? Like, this to me is that version of like, look, do they need to part ways? Maybe, but am I going to fault them for trying everything they can before they do it? No, because this is the Super Bowl window. So yeah, I hear people when they're like, oh, you should have traded him before the draft. You could have gotten more. My question is, what more? Like, what would we suddenly look at it and say, well, Rome Odunze is going to be replacement for Brandon Aiyuk? I don't know that. And would they've even got that value?
That high, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part about it is I think that hindsight is 2020. I know we all believe that, but sometimes I think we need to wrap context around it and really ask ourselves what the true benefit would be. I have no problem with the 49ers working every single day tirelessly to keep a great player in the locker room.
Yeah, I don't either. At the end of the day, I get it. I think I would have done the same thing, because you just think, Well, Brandon's going to play for $14.1 million. He's not going to leave that all on the table. But I just think at some point the situation becomes, we know he's not going to be happy. And I'm not, again, when I say stuff like this, I hate it because I don't want to question a guy's professionalism, but it's week 8. Brandon Aiyuk has a minor hamstring injury. If he had gotten his $30 million a year, he's probably playing through it. Does he play through it now? Like, and I get if he does it. Hey, you didn't invest in me. I'm not going to invest in you. Stuff like that, where he's out a couple of weeks where you didn't expect it, in the middle of the season, or he's just distracted and doesn't play well. Like that happens all the time in contract years. So I just think this whole saga is fascinating, Fitz, because again, we don't deal with this in August very much. You're talking about a key piece, a guy who led the 49ers in receiving yards by more than 300 yards last year. And he's probably going to be traded in August. And this trade stuff is happening in a very public way where we know everybody who's in the mix right now. We know why they're in or out of the mix. And yet the 49ers look like they're going to lose a key guy when it's their Super Bowl window. It's all very, very interesting and not something we see at this stage of the NFL season very often.
Well, the drama isn't just on the West Coast. There's East Coast drama with the Eagles, too. We'll get to that. But first, we're going to pay a couple of bills, and then Jori's going to join us straight off of her training camp tour. We'll get her players to watch. That's coming up next. The podcast just got some superstar power. There's a kick to it now. There's an energy. It's just, off the top rope. It's all of these things because Jori joins us now. We were talking about you coming into this. Frank and I have been talking a lot about Brandon Aiyuk. Now, Jori, let's start here. I know we're going to get into the players you want to watch, but I want to give you the chance to chime in on Aiyuk as we've tried to figure out sort of the what's and the hows of it. Give me your understanding where we are with it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to a few people because, again, it's funny. I was in Pittsburgh last week. I was in Cleveland earlier this week. Today I'm at Raiders practice and Brandon Aiyuk's agent is there just comment on the sidelines. I'm like, oh, hello, like you're relevant right now. And so I think as I put all of these pieces of information together, plus reaching out to some sources, I think here's the challenge is that, and we've seen some of this reported, but this is not, if Brandon Aiyuk is happy, it works. Or if the 49ers are happy, it works. Both of them have to agree for Brandon Aiyuk to go to another team. And that's why I laugh a little bit when I see Brandon Aiyuk has a deal imminent with this team because, what was it? Last year we saw Nick Bosa during training camp holding out and was Deebo Samuel the year before. I joke with some of my 49er sources. I'm like, I think you guys have more people holding out every year than the rest of the league combined. Like they know there's a lot of talent. They know there are people. And so how do you go about negotiating it? Now, I don't think that the Niners have negotiated with Aiyuk about an extension in the same way they negotiated with the last two guys based off my conversations with a few different people. And I think that then the challenge becomes, okay, let's say that Brandon Aiyuk and the Steelers or the Browns, either one, comes to an agreement for a deal. Well, if that team can't give the Niners the compensation they want, a deal is not getting done. So I was at Cleveland this week. I talked to Amari Cooper for half an hour. He is such a good fit in that system. But if they want someone who is younger and who does have more time left on his deal because Amari's in the final year of his deal and it's pretty tradable, then that might be something that, okay, the Niners get a really smart, crisp route runner in Amari. He already knows the Bay Area. If he wants to win a Super Bowl in his career, it's a chance. Maybe that works. But Pittsburgh, who are they going to give? This is not, I get that, yeah, you can talk trade compensation, and I would expect that at least a second round pick will be part of any of these packages. And I think a potential fair value for this would be a second round pick and a player for Aiyuk, but you have to pay him. I think what's challenging is the Steelers don't have that person. So let's say they want a receiver because we all saw the Niners in the Super Bowl last year. They are in win now mode. They should be in win now mode, especially before they pay Brock Purdy most likely next year. Well, then what do? Do you say, Pittsburgh, let's get this framework with Brandon. Now you give us a second and let's say a first. I don't know that, but let's say that. And then we go and trade that first to another team that has a receiver. And then we get that receiver for a few years. And if that's the case, that's going to take some time to get done because three teams and Brandon Aiyuk and his agent would all have to be in agreement on that. So I think when we talk about this thing being imminent, I think more likely conversations are being had with more people and thus more reports are coming out because as we all know, the more teams and the more agents you get involved, the more chances for a leak there are. But I think that the conversation is happening more than it's hey, it's going to be done. Now, of course, I'd probably say that, and before this episode comes out, Brandon Aiyuk has a deal, but that is my understanding of why this is so complicated and why it keeps feeling imminent and not happening.
Jori, let me ask you something real quick based on your conversations, because I keep wondering about this. is the door open on him to come back to the 49ers? Like, at some point, might Brandon Aiyuk just say, you know what? Nope, don't really want to go to the Patriots, and the Steelers thing is complicated. As you've said, this is all complicated. A lot needs to line up. At what point does Brandon Aiyuk say, you know what? The 49ers offer wasn't really that bad. I know this place. I could win a Super Bowl here. Maybe I just double back to that and do that, because it doesn't seem like anything's done. It doesn't seem like Brandon Aiyuk couldn't come back, but do you think there's any possibility that all of this ends up just with Brandon Aiyuk signing a contract extension with the 49ers?
I told a friend earlier today, I said, I think 60% chance he stays with the Niners, 30% Pittsburgh, and 10% Cleveland, based off my conversations. And I think this because how much did we think Debo wasn't going to be? Like, we think this every year with the Niners guys. Like, they figure it out, and then they win games and get money, and everyone's happy. Now, I will say, the language I would change in what you said is, do you think Brandon just decides this? I think more likely San Francisco would be the one to decide this, because Brandon, if he just wanted to be in San Francisco, wouldn't be going through this whole process necessarily. I think he wants his value, and that's a factor. I think San Francisco might be like, okay, no one's giving us what we want, and we're a Super Bowl contender, so we're going to keep you here. I also think it will be interesting because I think there's a non-zero chance that Brandon Aiyuk plays for San Francisco this year and plays on the final year of his contract, because I'm not sure they're willing to give him that money, not because they don't want him there, but because they paid a lot of guys recently, and now they're going to be paying Brock Purdy soon too.
Could Aiyuk be happy in that situation, though? My question is, it sounds so great. Like, okay, the 49ers, like, no, nobody's giving us what we want. We're just going to ride this out the last year.
Jori's not happy that she has to hang out with us while she's in the middle of training camp. She's still going to come out and do it because it's her damn job. Like, I hear you that Aiyuk's got to be happy, but come on, Jori. Like, I have a hard time believing that Aiyuk would be so unhappy that he would say, you know what, fine, I don't want any of your money. I will give all my game checks back.
I think it's worth noting that I've talked to people who have different opinions on whether he could be happy playing there this season. So it's a good question to be asking. I think it's one a lot of people are asking. I think that if you're Aiyuk and you don't want to be there, your best chance of getting another deal somewhere else and driving up your value is playing well. And I think also it's interesting because I've been around teams where the head coach is thoroughly involved, and I've been around teams where the head coach is like, I'm staying out of the football business because I need to coach. And so my question is, how much is Kyle Shanahan a part of this conversation? Because I would imagine Brandon Aiyuk is saying, Kyle, you know that if you want me, you can tell John that and it's going to happen. You know that you can figure this out. I had a GM tell me in the last few days, I was like, what do you do? Like, Justin Jefferson gets this deal and all of you guys who are paying quarterbacks can't figure out the market. And this GM goes, look at Howie, look at the Eagles. People can figure it out. It's about getting creative with accounting. How many quarterback and receiver and running backs and offensive linemen, and you got some defenders too, are the Philadelphia Eagles paying? I think what's more challenging, though, is when you haven't done your quarterback deal. Once you get your quarterback deal done, then you can start to get the creative accounting because you can figure out your voidable years, et cetera. And so that's why I'm like, I think that if the Niners were to do Aiyuk next year, once they've done Brock, they'll know what they're working with more. They'll have a better sense of the salary cap. They'll have a better sense of hey, are we going to go to an 18th game in the next 3 years and that's going to pour in all this new revenue? Like, what does that look like? So I don't think it's as simple him being happy. Chris Jones last year with the Chiefs, like, he held out a game, but then do you hold out the whole season? Like, if the Niners get something done with Aiyuk, I think it's the type of thing that gets done like in September. I don't think it's going to get done now because I think there's a lot of frustration between the parties, I would say.
I'm going to now frustrate you two as we put a bow on this by asking a very definitive question that they can clip off and make us all look like idiots. Right now, as we stand today, Frank Schwab, do you believe that the first game, I'm not saying week one, the first game that he plays this year, Brandon Aiyuk plays this year, is with the San Francisco 49ers? I will ask each of you that question. Frank, do you believe that the first game is Brandon Aiyuk 49ers?
No, I don't. I think he gets traded. I just think that they've gone too far with this thing, and there's enough fire going on that something could get done. So I say no, but I do respect that Jori put that 60% out there. That's way, way higher than I thought it would be.
Jori, what do you think?
I'll say yes. I think that the Niners are trying to drive up trade interest. I think they're trying to get more, but I think that the team most interested in signing him, in my opinion, is Pittsburgh, and I don't think they have the trade assets. So I think they would need to involve another team, and that gets really complicated to pull off now. The other example I'll point to, when I was in Miami for training camp last year, everyone and their mom thought Jonathan Taylor was going to be there soon. He wasn't. the Dolphins had a great rushing attack with their guys, and Jonathan Taylor went back to the Colts. So I don't know. I just think I think that there are a lot of times we felt like this is happening because the people who want us to feel like it's happening and who want the people that they're negotiating with to drum it up. I think that the Niners is still the most likely.
One real quick before we move on, real quick question, because I have not seen this definitively anywhere. Maybe I just missed it. Do the 49ers have an offer to Brandon Aiyuk? Have they ever made a long-term offer to him that's sitting out there? Hey, you can come back and get this. It's not what you want, but it's $25 million a year or whatever the number is. Have the 49ers made a long-term offer to Aiyuk at all? Do you know that?
I would say, based off my conversations, I think an offer was made at a different point, but they are not currently negotiating unless something has changed since I talked to people recently. And so that's one of the things that is challenging is I don't think this is we're giving you an offer, go find something 20% higher. Because again, another one who I think about this with is Lamar. Remember Lamar's tweeting, I remember being at owners meetings and Lamar's like, I'm going to go talk to people. I requested a trade, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, go test the market. I don't think Lamar actually tested the market from the people I've talked to. And so I do think Brandon is testing the market, but sometimes teams have you do that to show, well, what contract you actually think you're going to get out there. And it's a little, again, it also sometimes doesn't work out because we've seen those of us who watch the Giants Hard Knocks, and I haven't finished the series, but I watched far enough to see the Giants be like, Saquon, go test your value. And then he's like, cool, the Eagles will pay me $5 million more a season. See ya. And then you break John Mayer's heart, which also I'll just say, and I know I'm getting off on tangents. I talked to a scout on one of my stops about that. And I think this scout would be a great GM one day. And I was like, how would you handle this when you're a GM? And the scout goes, did you see what John Mayer wanted? Did you see it? Oh, he's the most popular player we've had in a decade and he's good. When your owner tells you to do something, you do something because that's who's writing the checks and making the decisions. So I do think that was interesting perspective of there are organizations in which the football people make the football decisions and there are organizations in which the owners make the football decisions.
I will just, I'll lay myself on the line with you too. I will say that I believe Brandon Aiyuk will play for the 49ers. Not only that, I think he's going to be a 49er all season. How do we this is going to get clipped off and not go well if he gets traded before this episode's even out there. All right, Jori, you've been on your training camp tour, which is luxurious and amazing, obviously.
Luxurious.
Yeah, that's what we're going to go with.
All those tuna packs I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but a lot of tuna has been consumed.
I don't judge. I won't bore anybody now, but if you just want to text me on the 0 to 10 how worried I should be about the Raiders since you were at practice, that's fine. But give me, I want to take a look at some players that you're interested on going into the preseason based on what you've seen or what you've heard and what you've been around. I want to start sort of with Chicago because I think everybody's got their eyes on them. I know you've been around the Bears. So what are your thoughts right now with all things Bears?
Yeah, what I think is interesting about the Bears, so obviously they played in the Hall of Fame game, but quarterback Caleb Williams, the first overall pick, did not play in that game. And to me, it is about what Caleb's doing. It's about their other first-round pick, number 9, Odunze, and not just what they're each doing on their own, but what they're doing when they're on the field together. Because when I was at Bears practice for 2 days, Rome was a very frequent target for Caleb. And I don't say that he was a very successful one. In fact, I talked to Rome and Rome told me look, there are some things with the go ball that we still need to get on the same page of how we're reading it, if it's over the top or if it's back shoulder and all sorts of things. And so one of the things I'll be watching is I visited them. It'll be about 2 weeks, I'm losing track of time, before this upcoming preseason game. And I want to see how their ability to be on the same page with the go ball has evolved over those 2 weeks, because that's what training camp's for. It's for them to make those mistakes. It's for them to not be on the same page and then have their resulting conversations. And it'll be interesting to see, especially against the vanilla defenses that everyone gives in the preseason, what they're able to do.
I'm really interested in it. I know that fits. And not just because I'm in more fantasy leagues than I'd like to admit here on a podcast, but I just think about Rome Odunze. It's very rare that a number 9 selected overall receiver comes in and is like, where am I getting targets from? Because they already have DJ Moore, the highest paid player in team history. They have Keenan Allen, who is a target monster and might be a Hall of Famer someday if he has a couple more good years. I just wonder, where does Rome Odunze's fit? Where does he get his targets? But then I watch these highlights just like everybody else. And I'm like, man, maybe Caleb, they've had a relationship going back for a while, and that does matter. And maybe that works itself out. I'm really interested to see the Bears offense and how the pie is separated, basically.
Does that raise any concern, though? Because we're not sure if Caleb's going to play in the preseason at this point. Everything you're saying, Jori, speaks to the fact that preseason reps feel like they would be a benefit, no?
No, I disagree. I think that preseason reps are less helpful than, for example, a joint practice, which the Bears do have coming up, because in preseason reps, you're going against vanilla defenses and no one's going to show you their scheme. I was talking to a coach, and again, in the last few days, who told me that they intentionally schedule joint practices against someone, one, who they know the coach, so they can decrease the chance of fighting, and two,
Lions.
you can guess it was not from my Detroit stop that I had this conversation. And two, that they intentionally pick a team with a different defensive scheme than what their defense has, because that's what they want their players to see, and that's what they want their ones to get reps on. And you can kind of do it in a more controlled environment. And so I think the joint practice is where we need to see it more than we need to see it in the preseason games. And I don't think there's a clear should Caleb play in the preseason or not. I don't feel strongly about that either way.
Okay, so give me another player that you've been everywhere. So you pick of the litter here. Is there another player that you've seen that you've said, oh my gosh, I want to take a look at that person?
Yeah, Ennis Rakestraw out of Mizzou, their second round corner. They also had a first round pick at corner. And so it's easy to be like, oh, well, they like the top guy better. Ennis has just been like a ball magnet in practices. I was there 2 days. He intercepted passes both of those days in team drills. I think he had 3 interceptions one day before I was there. And you have to remember, this is against Ben Johnson's offense, which I think is like an extremely complex offense for defenses to try and understand. And so when he's jumping around on one day and then another time diving for an interception, there were different ways that he was getting these interceptions. They were not coming against Jared Goff, to be fair. But I think when you see someone doing that, first of all, then they're definitely going to be able to do it against more vanilla offenses in the preseason. And then I also think the more you continue to do this, the more you get confidence, the more your teammates get confidence in you. And then, what do you know, week 1, week 2, when they need someone in the secondary, he has a really strong chance of making that position.
Let me circle back real quick. I think the biggest beneficiary to all this Brandon Aiyuk drama is the Detroit Lions. I feel better about my Detroit Lions pick for the Super Bowl. After all this has gone down, the 49ers might be downgrading at receiver. And reports like that, like you talked about, Jori, with Ennis Rakestraw. And we know Terry Arnold's going to be there, their first round pick. Carlton Davis came over in a trade. They attacked that cornerback position. They knew, hey, this is the one thing. This is our biggest weakness. We need to fix this. If we fix this, we could be a Super Bowl team. And so hearing positive reports about the kids at cornerback really makes me even more confident in the Lions, along with the Aiyuk drama out in San Francisco. I think Detroit's the best team in the NFC right now. And I think that the fact that the cornerbacks are going to keep getting better and better and maybe be a plus for that team after they acquired 4 different ones this offseason. Great news out of Detroit. I think Detroit has had, let's say, again, whoever gets Aiyuk is really going to be happy, but I think Detroit is going to be really happy that Ayuk's out of there.
And I'll also add that Ben Johnson, when I was there, said that in the first couple days of pads, he felt like their offense had more run stuff than all of the past 2 training camps combined, because that defensive line has just really gotten super solid. I know that's run stuff, not a pass, but when you think about the defensive line giving that kind of pressure, what's the secondary's best friend? It's the rush that's allowing them to cover and creating these just situations for the quarterback where, 1, they need to get the ball out, and 2, they don't have as much time to get it to the perfect place or at the perfect time. And so I think you then have a secondary that's really going to benefit from that.
Yeah, you're right. And by the way, I thought Rakestraw, I was stunned he was still there in the 3rd round. So or second round, I should say. I was stunned he was still there in the 2nd round. So good move by Detroit all the way around. You were also at Chargers practice, and everybody's got all eyes on Harbaugh and everything. But what stood out to you? What player stood out to you that you were looking at?
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. Justin Herbert is in a boot right now for his plantar fascia, which I have a lot of empathy for, because I went 12 weeks. I'm 12 weeks into my rehabilitation from a torn plantar fascia. I was kind of taking the beat writers through that. I'm 2 weeks, he's going to be back out there and able to plant. I had my foot immobilized for 9 weeks. And then it was 3 more weeks. And the doctor's well, your plantar fascia is so tight now that even if it's not torn anymore, your Achilles is tight. And so you could tear your Achilles if you do that. He's the worst thing you could do right now is go play tennis or go jump or just go or run and catch a bus, because it's just that sudden movement. And Justin Herbert has I think a tear in his plantar fascia, something in his plantar fascia, and I think it was plantar fasciitis. He wouldn't be sitting out and they wouldn't be calling it a plantar fascia injury. And he's all of a sudden get a plant in 2 weeks. I find that hard to believe. I think you can shoot up the pain and it's pretty easy to play through the pain, but I'm a little nervous about the surrounding tendons. Anyway, so he's not practicing. Ladd McConkey is also injured, although the reviews are getting great. So kind of a late round pick is Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, had this blocked that was like, they're really emphasizing the receiver blocks in this Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman offense. And all of a sudden there's just this loud noise and we're like, what was that? And it was Brendan Rice making a block. And I was standing with one of their executives, and they were very impressed. And so I do think that, I don't think he's going to be there like receiver one, but I do think when you think about how a receiver can make the team, it's kind of like with that physicality that you'll then be able to, one, help out on offense or in protection, or run blocking. And then also like that kind of physicality is what you're going to want on special teams, which is a great way for someone at the end of the roster. So that is great. But yes, did talk to Joe All. I was super impressed by him. Very tall person, I will say. Like
it was 6'8", right? 6'8", 330. Is that what we're?
Was it 6'9", I think?
Yeah, whatever.
I maybe listed at 6'9".
Yeah.
Well, I was laughing because I always, before I get to these places, I create a playlist of all like the recent interviews that players and coaches have done there on YouTube, and I'll just like play it at 1.5 speed on my drives. And I think it was Khalil Mack who was like, "Oh, I didn't notice how tall he was. Like, one, like aren't all of our offensive linemen tall? And two, like I don't know, I guess he's got good pad level or something, but." Tall guy, and definitely like really making it a point to like stay after practice with Rashawn Slater, learn from him. And I also think it's good that they're like, you are going to play right tackle, Rashawn Slater is going to play left tackle, and they're not sort of like moving guys around. I get that there's benefits to versatility. I also think that's really hard for a young player. And so he's got to learn the other side, but he's kind of like learning one position throughout training camp, and that's going to be important.
For absolutely no reason, if Herbert, waited until week 2 to come back and play that, I'd be okay with that. All right, for no reason at all.
The Browns told me that about Trayvon Diggs too. They're like, can you tell the Cowboys like just let Trayvon come back a week later? I'm like, yes, and I'll just let Jerry know like you need to hold Trayvon out.
Okay. I mean, if we're just sitting in requests, like let's go. All right. I am interested in the wide receiver position at Cincinnati. You obviously got to check out the Bengals. Who stood out to you there?
Yeah, so obviously with Jamar Chase holding in, that means that he is at practice, he's in his baseball cap, he is not wearing pads, he's not wearing a helmet, he's not practicing, which creates opportunities for other guys. The one who receivers coach Troy Walters really pointed out to me was Andre Iosivas. So Princeton kid, track star, this is his second year in the offense, so he's kind of like got that familiarity with what his responsibilities are, and he's been getting opportunities at receiver 3 with the first team offense, which means he's getting that chemistry with Joe Burrow down. And so I think he's one who, like size, speed, just had a lot of the traits already, and then now understands how to apply them. Because again, coming from Princeton, like he did great at Princeton, but he wasn't playing against the same level of competition as some of his teammates who came in at the college level. And I think he's someone who this year you'll really see make an impact.
And you'll see me never pronounce his name correctly, ever.
I think I got it.
Yeah, I can't. No,
I'm not going to question.
I think it's Iosivas. And when someone first said his name to me, I was like, wait, it took me a minute. But even yesterday when I was talking to the receivers coach at the Chargers, Sanjay Lal, he was like, yeah, and Giro. And I'm like, am I just supposed to know that everyone calls Greg Roman Giro? Because I didn't. Also, like, you all have the same names. I talked to 2 coaches named Luke today at the Raiders. So like, you need to just differentiate yourselves. Name your kids Jory. Okay, continue.
The one thing about the Bengals receiver situation is all eyes were on Jermaine Burton. Everybody talked about how he had first-round talent, but he slipped because character concerns. And now you just wonder if he's been passed on the depth chart. And guys get forgotten quickly. Third-round rookies, like, whatever. Like, you didn't do anything as a rookie. We're just moving on. We've seen that before. And so I wonder how it bodes for his future that he's not really showing out in camp. But I do also envision, you think about the 2025 Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to get Jamar Chase done. We know that. If Burton comes along like he should, and the guy whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce again, if he's a good, solid number 3, all of a sudden they've kind of reloaded. They've kind of like, we're back, like the old Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. So we'll just replace a couple of the names because we're still stocked at receiver for Joe Burrow the next few years.
Okay, I will say I agree with you that like people move on from guys quickly in the NFL, but I was laughing because I was listening to the Brock Bowers interview that he did recently on my way to Raiders today. And he was like, yeah, in college, if you mess up, they'll work with you. Like in the NFL, if you mess up, you'll get cut. And I'm like, some guys will, but you, Brock Bowers, are not going to get caught because you made a mistake. So like,
likely not getting cut.
I appreciate the humility. I appreciate the chip on your shoulder, but like, sir, you're going to be there.
I always think with Brock, it's so ironic too. Like when we saw him at the Super Bowl in Vegas, I asked him, I was like, so you having a good time? And he'd taken a private in so that he could do his endorsement stuff, and they get out right away. And it's ironic to me because he was like, I was like, you're not spending any time in Vegas. And he said, man, the way I look at it is if I approach my career the right way, I'll eventually have the time to do Vegas the way I would like to do it. But this isn't that time. Like, I'm focused. Now it's like, oh, well, that's every single day for Brock. So every day he has to make that decision. All right, speaking of wide receivers, though, one guy I loved in the draft, I'm just going to be unapologetic about the fact that I am an AD Mitchell, just absolute fanboy, not just for the speed, but just for, I mean, you go back and watch any of his film in college. Absolutely incredible. I know you checked out the Colts. What'd you think of AD?
Yeah, I talked to AD after practice, and it was funny. The day I was there, I believe it was their first day in pads, and AD had like a series of catches. Now, he got a lot of opportunities. Some of them were catches. There was one ball that Joe Flacco and he were not seeing the same way. I think it was like kind of an out route towards the right sideline, but then they came back and made it together on they connected on a play the next series, and Flacco was pretty pumped, but the beat writers were like, oh yeah, he hasn't been actually getting opportunities until you showed up, Jori. So like, we don't know what happened today. But I talked to him, and look, I think that especially with Josh Downs' injury, and you know what, why don't we do this? Go back to Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. I don't think that Rome is going to get the opportunities only because of his talent. I think there's something to be said for the guy that you come in with and the guy that you're like, hey, we're growing together. It's not that Caleb would be like against the other guys. It's not that he would like eschew them in his read and try and just make sure that they can't get it. But the same way that when a GM takes a guy or a coach takes a guy, like that's your guy. Anthony Richardson has played very little football. Now he's going to come into an offense with AD Mitchell that has the opportunity for someone to become the receiver one, because like Michael Pittman Jr., he has been productive, but not really getting into the end zone as much as he can. And AD is a big body and might have that opportunity. And so I think that he will have quite the opportunity to endear himself to Anthony Richardson. The other completely irrelevant note that I'll give you is, so I was supposed to talk to AD Mitchell and then also their cornerback, Jalen Jones. And they were deciding who was going to talk to me first, because whoever went first got to leave first and go home. And so they played rock, paper, scissors. And I guess AD won. And then he told me he always does rock and then paper. And I'm like, don't people figure that out? So then I told that to Jalen, and I was like, don't tell him you know, but next time, like, challenge him again. If he always does rock and then paper, I think you have a pretty clear road to victory. So I don't know. I'm just saying, like, we might need to work on the rock, paper.
He always picks rock for you Simpsons fans out there. With AD Mitchell, I thought it was a home run pick in the second round. I thought the Colts made two great picks. Latu in the first round, I thought was great value. I thought Mitchell in the second was great value. It totally went against what the Colts usually do. They're a safe team. They really don't go out on many limbs, but they did for both of those guys for different reasons. Love both picks. I think Mitchell's going to be really good, especially the Downs injury. I think the Downs injury is huge because all signs were that he was really coming along. He was having a good camp, but all of a sudden he has a high ankle sprain. And for people who they should know by now, high ankle sprain means you're going to be out there, but you're going to be a shell of yourself when you come back. It's just the way it is. Like, I hope not. I hope Josh Downs comes back in September sometime and balls out, but the odds are he probably will not be right all season. We saw it with Jerry Jeudy in his second year, stuff like that. So I think AD Mitchell has a real chance because who's really competing with him for targets? We know Pittman's going to be the first read. Like, in that offense, it's a lot of times one read offense. Pittman's going to get his, and they paid him as such. Great. Awesome. Who's the secondary guy? They really don't have a tight end who's going to scare anybody. If Josh Downs isn't his normal self, Jonathan Taylor's not a pass catcher. Like, look, on Wisconsin and all, but he's not a pass catcher. I love him, but he's not that dude. So I think AD Mitchell could carve out a really, really nice role right away. And he's got the talent to take off with this job. I mean, we've seen second round receivers have an impact before. And I mean, T. Higgins for one name. And I think AD Mitchell could be a really big part of this Colts offense right away. He should have been a first round pick. Talent wise, there's no question about it.
Well, and Frank, I think you make a good point of this idea of like, it could be that Pittman's the guy who gets those chunk plays, helps them move down the field. But then when you get to the end zone, AD's the one who you really think is going to go up and win that 50-50 ball.
Jori, you made a good point about guys growing together. And I always think of this years ago, before I ever did this for a living. I had a friend that was drafted by the Titans. And I remember he was drafted. It was early in his rookie progress. And I went to lunch with him in Nashville and I was like, hey, how's it going? And he said, man, this is such an adjustment because in college, we went everywhere together as a team. We went to class together. We ate together. We hung out together at night. We were together. And he's like, here, the minute we stop our activities, our practices, or our meetings, These are a bunch of grown-ass men that go home to their families. And he's like, I'm sitting around and I have no idea what to do. I think sometimes what we forget in the magic of younger players coming in together is that because they're also younger in their life spot where they are, it does afford them more opportunity to, like, you know, stay after and throw here and stay after. I'm not saying that guys don't do that at the higher level. I'm just saying that when you come in together, it creates a different bond. I genuinely believe that from young players that maybe at a different life spot than a veteran team where you're just a young guy and you're singled out. So that's one of the things that I think could be really magical, and it was magical for Burrow and Jamar, right? Like, we always talk about players that came together and from college. I think for Rome and for Caleb in these situations, for AD and AR, I just think there's a real opportunity for guys to bond at a different level because they have a community with each other, knowing that they're part of this new life and trying to also figure out what their sea legs look like in it.
I totally agree. Although I gotta say, I hope Anthony stays healthy all season. I'm really excited to see what he can do. Joe Flacco looked so freaking good at practice. And I was like, sir, are you 39 or are you 29? Like, it's just like, I'm not saying his ceiling is what Anthony's is, especially at this stage in his career, but like the accuracy, the ball placement, the timing, like all of that. I'm like, wow. It was a good
I have to figure out how Joe Flacco got demoted to the third string quarterback on the 2022 Jets at some point, because they were the most miserable quarterback team I've seen in a while until the 2023 Jets, I guess. And how on earth did Joe Flacco not take off? Who is Joe Flacco at this point? I've talked all off season about how Flacco, whatever, good story, but the Browns around him were really good. If Flacco found this fountain of youth, like this is one of the weirder stories I can remember.
I feel very invested in this because last year was my first time voting for MVP, comeback player of the year, all this stuff. And it was really controversial when Joe Flacco won it instead of Damar Hamlin. But as it was written at that time, the rules were someone who comes back to a football role. And so Damar Hamlin, like, it wasn't that, oh, he came back and he played fine. Like, he really did not play very much. And so I'm like, yes, obviously I respect the heck out of what Damar did, the courage it takes to get back on the field after what you've experienced. And I'm so grateful that he is okay. But for Joe to come off the couch and play like he did, to me, was more in line with the spirit of the award. And so I voted for Joe.
Tua Tagovailoa should have won this, Jori. Tua Tagovailoa almost retired, and he almost won an MVP. He should have been comeback player of the year.
Joe, I would have been fine with either of them, and I think they were both guesses, but Damar just did not meet the criteria. And I remember my group texts were like blowing up, mad that Damar didn't win, and I'm like, sorry guys, I'm part of this problem.
I think the most important thing is that this podcast today has finally answered the question, is Joe Flacco elite? We have the answer to that. Jori, thank you for taking the time out of your training camp tour. We can't wait for more updates. And also, again, just 0 to 10, just text me what level of...
I was about to interrupt you because I was going to tell you, you guys get a 10 today. This was really fun.
Until that last part fits. Now it's down to 9. Now that you brought it up.
No. Wait, we get it. We're getting a 10 here?
10. I don't know why, but I don't know if I'm just feeling magnanimous or what. Like the sun, it's just been great. I'm getting all my vitamin D, but this was good. I think you did good work today.
I just think she's buttering us up because she doesn't disappoint me after seeing my beloved Raiders. Jori, thank you so much. Enjoy the tour. We'll see you again soon. In the meantime, guys, we've got drama in Philly, and no better people to handle the drama than Frank and I. We'll get you updated on the big story and what it means for the Eagles season coming up next. So let's get back to the drama because, let's face it, that's the best part of the NFL offseason, best part of any sports offseason, Frank. And the Eagles are giving it to us now by way of a report from Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler. I will say this with a lot of bias. I've worked with both of them in my time at ESPN. I have to stress this. They are two great reporters when it comes to being well-researched. They don't put things out for clicks. They don't really care about that. Fowler is one of the most unique. Like, he believes it when he prints it, and he wouldn't if he didn't. So I have to say that because interesting article talking about the fractured relationship between Nick Sirianni, head coach, and Jalen Hurts, quarterback. And Frank, I think it just speaks to the fact that we have to remember at the end of last season, there was real conversation about whether Sirianni would keep his job or not. This is a reminder that things there are on much thinner ice than we want to acknowledge from the outside looking in Philadelphia. Yeah,
a very eye-opening report, even though we knew nothing was good there by the end of last year. I mean, when a coach goes from winning 26 of 31 games and in 7 weeks, all of a sudden he's basically 50-50 on whether he's going to come back. And the owner has talks to Bill Belichick and all that. Like it's rare to see it really go sour that quickly. He keeps his job, and now it's just awkward. Like it really is. And we've talked about this, and I'll reiterate it. The range of outcomes for the Eagles this year is first coach fired, or win a Super Bowl. Like I'd believe either one. And when you read this story about Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, you get to the heart of how awkward this whole season might be. Even if they win, it's still going to be uncomfortable because a lot of their business is out there on the streets, questioning Sirianni's X's and O's acumen. And, and it really, you go back to a couple years ago when they made the Super Bowl and you think, Shane Steichen's a pretty good coordinator that they lost, and we didn't account for that enough. Is bringing on Kellen Moore to take over the offense, does that fix everything? Because that was a big part of Sirianni coming back. We all know that basically the Eagles said, okay, dude, you're going to be a CEO coach. We're going to let our offensive coordinator, who ended up being Kellen, he's going to run the offense. We're going to let Vic Fangio run the defense. You just kind of oversee everything, which kind of stripped Sirianni of all of his power, which makes it even weirder than we thought. So the whole situation's weird. I don't know if it could really be fixed, but winning solves everything. It's just another layer to this Eagles team that I don't know what to make of them. I really don't. I have no clue where this Eagles story is going, just because they were so bad at the end of last year. And this story reminds us of how fractured everything was.
I think we also have to sort of play the shoe on the other foot game for a second here. Cowboys fans, I'll just, Kellen Moore. Eagles fans, Kellen Moore because he was the offensive coordinator there. I would ask Eagles fans, were you scared of the offense under Kellen Moore? I mean, Kellen Moore was the scapegoat for why things weren't going right for Dak, right? And then he goes to work with Justin Herbert. He's gone from Dak to Justin Herbert. And were people sitting there saying, oh my God, how are we ever going to stop Kellen Moore's offense with the Chargers? That just didn't really happen. Like, you talk about somebody that every step has gotten some level of name recognition and benefit of the doubt from it, and I don't really understand it. I'm looking at Sirianni and saying, if Kellen Moore is supposed to be a great hope, he's worked with two great quarterbacks, and both of those jobs he's gotten fired from. So there is an element of me of like, I'm not looking at that as saying, oh, well, this guy's a mastermind, right? So now you bring in, and Sirianni's lost a little bit of the benefit of the doubt considering who he brought in last year for his coordinators. That was an abject disaster. So now you have this fracture, and it just speaks to something we talk a lot about. Like, I don't think it's not about the coach. It's not about the quarterback. It's about both of them together. And if they're not, like in today's NFL, if they're not symbiotic in every way, it just breaks. Now, I know everybody will say, well, Brady and Belichick hated each other. Sure, but they had to have a lot of success before they got to that point. So great. If we get to the point where someday Mahomes and Andy Reid don't get along, but they've won 7 Super Bowls, they'll learn to deal with it. In these growing stages, what do you see? Like Dan Campbell and Jared Goff obviously have a connection in the way that they communicate. Sean McVay has that same connection with his quarterback, right? Like, look across the league at the quarterback coach situations, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, that are working. And it really does feel like two people that are on the same page, two people that understand their identities, two people that understand their personalities, two people that work together. So when I see Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are having this sort of disagreement on everything on offensive vision, the first thing I think is, man, if you're fractured now, it's not going to get any better, especially in that market. They lose 3 or 4 games in a row. It's immediately going to be, I'm going to save myself. I don't give a damn about this person, because that's what happens when you're not connected.
Yeah, and there was one absolutely fascinating passage in that story, and I think it was Mina Kimes who highlighted it, and it was after Week 18 that they had played the Giants. The Giants fire Wink Martindale, or he steps away, whatever it was. The relationship ended between Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator of Giants, and the Giants. Jalen Hurts called up Wink Martindale and basically was like, what's wrong? How did you scheme for us? What's going on? How can we get this better? And in some way, that's just Jalen Hurts. He's always looking to improve, and I respect that about him, his work ethic and all that. So that part of it is very interesting. But the other part of it is, I don't know that he trusted his head coach to give him those answers, right? Like, he's looking for outside counsel to say, what the heck are we doing wrong? Why are we struggling this bad? And I think even in the story, if I remember right, Wink Martindale said, I've been coaching 30 years and I've never had that happen, where basically a guy we just played called me up and was like, what's wrong? And I thought that was really, really interesting. And you could chalk it up to just, hey, Jalen Hurts is just, this guy's fired. He's not with the Giants anymore. He could talk freely. He's just trying to get some information. Nothing wrong with that. But you could also look at it the other way of, he trusted a defensive coordinator he probably didn't know that well to fix the situation over his head coach. Like, really, like, you could look at it that way. I thought that passage and that one story kind of summed up the whole thing with the kind of fracture we talked about with Sirianni and Hurts. Again, this could all get fixed very easily. Eagles are 9-1 and everybody's happy again. And we're not, this conversation looks ridiculous because nobody remembers it. But it also, we need to keep it in mind with every Eagles loss this year and every bad thing that happens to them.
I mean, I will say this. I work on Saturdays with Anthony Gargano on Fox Sports Radio. And that he's a Philly guy through and through. From there, loves it, hosts a lot of Philly content. I hear you that if they're 9-1, all is forgotten. But if there's anything I've learned from working with Cousins so much, like Eagles lose 2 or 3 in a row, I don't care when it is. I don't care if it's the beginning of the season, the middle of the season, the end of the season. They lose 2 or 3 in a row, it will be absolute panic because last year they were 10-1. And everybody's going to immediately say, yeah, but look at what happened last year. Yeah, we went through this. You know what I mean? So like that is so in the forefront of the media that covers the team and the fan base that cheers for the team. And now you hear this. And I think it's substantial that when you hear that there's a disconnect in offensive visions and a lack of respect for Sirianni's X's and O's chops. The thing of that is, like, look, if you come in as a special teams coordinator, Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, or Tomlin, if you come in, even Antonio Pierce, right? You come in as a guy that's not necessarily known for your offensive or defensive X's and O's. You're known for being a guy that can come in and be a leader. You can get away with almost anything. If you come in with an area of expertise and that area of expertise fails, then all of a sudden the entire locker room doubts you. And I mean, that's not even just from me. That's from guys that played, right? That have talked to me about this extensively. Once the locker room doesn't trust the thing that you're supposed to be great at, I don't know how you win that trust back, especially if your answer is, well, Kellen Moore's in charge of that now. That just doesn't. Vic Fangio's in charge of these things now. I'm just a figurehead. Well, how do you keep respect in that if you weren't hired? If you're hired as a figurehead and you remain a figurehead, that's one thing. If you were hired as a brilliant coach and you have to become a figurehead, I don't know how you keep the respect of the locker room.
I agree with that. And something I thought about at the time, and I really keep thinking about it, especially after that story and all the details, which I'm sure Eagles brass knew plenty about. Why not just fire Nick Sirianni? Like, what's the upside at this point? And having him back when he looks like a lame duck, obviously, if they struggle, he's gone. We know that. I mean, is it something where they just felt like we can't fire a coach who took us to a Super Bowl, went 10-1 7 weeks later? It just wouldn't make sense. But I think at some point you just say, is this the best thing for the 2024 Eagles to have Nick Sirianni still as our head coach? And maybe the answer is yes. Maybe they have reasons that Sirianni is going to be perfect in this new role and Moore's going to run the offense, Fangio's going to run the defense, and they're going to have a great season. Sure, I could see that happening. But with all of this kind of negativity and weirdness and awkwardness, wouldn't it just be better to just say, look, this is unprecedented. It's kind of strange. But we just know that 2024 is going to be so weird and off the wall that we're just going to have to change head coaches. Like, I think it's at least worth asking, and that's something that will be asked if they get off to a slow start, of why didn't they replace Nick Sirianni when it was obvious it was 50-50? Look, Jeffrey Lurie talked to Bill Belichick. That's been out there and reported. It was obvious that they were considering replacing him. I guess the question for me is, why didn't they replace him? Well, what would be the reason other than, hey, we feel some sort of obligation because he put together a really, really good record over the last 2 years on a total? I don't know. I just don't know any other reason beyond that to keep Nick Sirianni for this season when his power got stripped from him.
So I pulled up their schedule here. They start with the Packers. We all know how the world loves the Packers. Then they get the Falcons. The Falcons are a team that some people are very high on. The Saints the Saints will see, the Bucks will see. Then they get the Browns, a team that you and I are very high on. The Giants, they'll be fine. But then they get the Bengals, a team that most people are very high on. Then the Jags and the Cowboys. Like, it is not hard for me to get to November and suddenly the Eagles are struggling. If things haven't gelled right, the Eagles are struggling. And that's when those questions become so loud. And this is the thing that, like, you just got to get ahead of. And I'd say the same thing about the Eagles that I've been saying about the Jets. Like, if you know the chaos is coming, then you've got to get ahead of it. This article coming out, like, Sirianni, Hurts, they're going to have to address it, and they're going to have to mind their P's and Q's whenever there's a camera in range. Because, frankly, the first time we see a very normal moment on the sideline where Jalen Hurts throws his iPad because there's Galaxy, I guess they are there, because he's frustrated, we're all going to turn around instead of looking at that and saying, wow, that's an emotional player in an emotional moment. We're going to be like, oh, he must be mad at Sirianni. Like, that's immediately what's going to happen, man.
Or normal disagreements on the sideline that happen between literally every coach and position player at some point. It's a heated game. It's a competitive environment. But you know how it is. Like last year when A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts had kind of words on the sideline. Nothing unusual about that, but it's Philly, and we saw it. And as a quarterback, that's going to happen tenfold if it's Hurts and Sirianni having words on the sideline after some kind of bad play call or interception or wherever shall be. Everything will be dissected at that point. Yeah, it's an unusual situation. And like you talked about with the early season schedule, we're sitting there saying, they'll beat the Giants and they'll beat this team. Last year, they lost to the Cardinals at home after having a lead. They got boat raced by the Buccaneers in the playoffs. They lost to the Giants week 18. I get they pulled starters in that one. But this was a team that wasn't a sure thing to beat anybody last year. So what if they do lose these kind of games that could go either way, like the Packers? Packers game could go either way, for sure. What if they do lose to the Falcons, who could be pretty good this year? What if they lose to the Giants? Like, all of a sudden, you don't win those games and the schedule gets a lot tougher, and it just could spiral badly for the Eagles. Or they could be 9-0. I really have no idea with this Eagles team. They are really, really confounding.
But here's the thing that I always ask. I ask for us to be consistent and benefit of the doubt when we're making our preseason analysis. So what I mean by that, as I said earlier, why is it that we're sitting here saying that the contracts are going to be a dispute? Like, I have argued with radio stations across the country that tell me the Cowboys are going to suck because of contract disputes. And I constantly say, tell me why CD not having a new deal or Dak not having a new deal is actually going to impact a game on week 4. It isn't. Like, it impacts what we talk about, but it's not going to impact a game on week 4. So my thing is that if we want to take the negative for the Cowboys and say, well, these contracts sure are a distraction, then we have to also take the negative for the Eagles, which is, by the way, the quarterback and the head coach still aren't on the same page. Like Jalen Hurts' response when he was asked, what have you noticed about Nick being open-minded to change up the offense like he has? What's that say about him? Hurts' response just a few weeks ago was, it's a great question. I don't know that I have the answer to it. So if I'm going to sit here and say that the implosion of the Cowboys is based on the drama of contracts, is it not also fair to say then that the Eagles are headed for an implosion because they can't get right between their coach and their quarterback, and there's obviously friction behind the scenes?
You know what I'm hearing you say with all of this? We think the Cowboys have their drama, the Eagles have their drama. This just leads to Washington Commanders, NFC East champions 2024, right? Like, that's where we're going?
Look, maybe when I'm in Vegas, I'm going to Vegas this weekend. Maybe I'll put like a little pizza money on Washington. No, I've got stacks on the over total for the Cowboys. So I really need the Cowboys to win 11. I don't care how it happens. Cowboys got to win 10 games for me because of when I got in. I got racks on the Cowboys winning 10 games. That's all I need. So I don't care who wins the division as long as the Cowboys win 10 games. We're no longer dabbling at this point. We're straight degenerates.
There's no dabble involved here.
I'm puckered up every Sunday until the Cowboys get to 10 wins, and then dinner's on me for a couple of weeks. That's all I'm saying, Frank. Good luck.
I respect it. Of course I respect it. Why wouldn't I?
I appreciate that about you. Okay, so let's wrap this up then. Right now, if I had to, we always say, Chiefs versus the field. The smart bet is the field. So I won't ask you that. I'll ask you very directly. If I had to ask you which of these two teams wins the NFC East, Cowboys or Eagles, which one would you take today?
Cowboys. I just think they've been so underrated all off season, and we talk about doing shows like radio shows. Every time the Cowboys come up, the same thing comes up, and it's, well, Jerry Jones said they're all in, and they didn't. Well, who cares? Like, if he never said that, does that make the Cowboys better right now? Like, it's kind of a nonsensical narrative, but it's a Cowboys. I still think they're the same team that won 12 games 3 years in a row. Yes, a few things have gone against them. They lose Sam Williams to an ACL. Sam Williams doesn't move the line in Vegas. Let's put it that way. I feel bad for him. It's a tough loss for the Cowboys, but that ain't moving the line for me. I still think the Cowboys are that same team that's going to win 12 games and disappoint in the playoffs, and that'll be enough to win the NFC East.
Yeah, I actually agree with you completely. I think the Cowboys are going to win the NFC East. You can tell us what you think on Twitter, by the way, at Yahoo Schwab, at Jason Fitz, at Jori Epstein. That's how you get to all of us. Also, if you didn't see this, you should see this now. The Yahoo Fantasy League is doing a great giveaway. Details at yahoo.com/fantasy million. You got a chance to win $1 million. Frank and I do not have a chance to win $1 million, but you do. It's an awesome partnership. You might if the Cowboys
go over 9.5 games, though.
I mean, it ain't $1 million, but it's enough for some dinner. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Racks. Yahoo.com/fantasy million. Partnership with Yahoo and NBC for a great fantasy prize. $1 million. Somebody's going to win it. Get out there, get it, and be sure you're hanging out with us. Remember, Remember, we're on our own feed now, so you can get all of the NFL shows together on one feed if you want, but also if you're just checking us out on the Inside Coverage feed, be sure to rate, subscribe, review, tell your friends, your family, and enemies. Tell everybody to hang out. Most importantly, Stone is back. Little round of applause for Stone being back in the seat, doing God's work, keeping us on track. We appreciate you hanging out with us. We'll be back next week.